First of all, welcome everybody. It's always good to see you. And even though I can't be with you in person, we can't be together in person. This is a way that God has made available to us, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be with you in this way. I want to share. Last week I alluded to that a narrative that I'm gravitating towards for this era that we're living in is the narrative from that emerges from God's words through Jeremiah to the exiles in Babylon from Jeremiah 29. If you recall, this is the place in which God is letting the exiles know that it's going to be a while, and He says to them, take wives and husbands for yourself, have children and find wives and husbands for your children, and seek the welfare of the city in which you have been planted. And I just am convinced that this is a proper biblical narrative for us to be dwelling in, because it means a couple of things. It means that we still have an important vocation, and it hasn't changed. We're still called to share the good news of Jesus Christ, to be God's people in this time and place by sharing that good news to everyone we can, in every way we can, and everywhere we can. And even though there's one way we can't do it anymore, we're finding all kinds of other ways to do that, and we're able to share the good news with even more people in many cases. And so I think it's a proper biblical narrative for us also, because while I don't believe it will be 70 years that we'll be in this exile, I do think it'll be for a few more months, if not up to possibly a year. So this section has within it one of the most well-known promises and beloved promises from the Old Testament, which is this verse from Isaiah 29:11. For surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future with hope. There's so much we don't know right now, right? And I love these words. For surely, God says, I know the plans I have for you. And they are plans for welfare and not for harm, and a future with hope. So let us pray. Holy God, we give you thanks for the vocation to which you've called us and the ways in which you invite us to expand and reimagine it in this interesting time. We ask that you will continue to keep the promise that you have been keeping, to send your Spirit and to be present with us, Lord Jesus. We ask it in your holy name. Amen. So I'm going to run through the agenda for today real quickly. Chris is going to give a little update. Pastor Keith Zay will give an update on mission support. I'm going to share with you some resources that are coming out in terms of worship and preaching and other videos. I'm going to have an update on guidance, because I know I promised you that last week, and I'll share with you why you don't have it yet and what you can expect soon. I have a video, which I'm sure many of you have probably seen, but we've edited it down to 15 minutes. It's the video with Mike Osterholm and his through the Minneapolis Area Synod. So that's going to take about 15 minutes, and we'll do that towards the end. We're making that available in this edited format because we feel like 15 minutes in length is something that you can probably get your leaders to spend time with. And if they do, then maybe they'll want to go on and watch the 42-minute version. But we cut out what we think are the most salient points. So we'll share that toward the end as well. And we will have time for questions, believe it or not, even after all of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris Dernier, our communications director. And someday she'll also be the First Third of Life coordinator. And with God's grace, our events coordinator as well. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing something other than communicating with you guys. It's been a joy to be able to communicate. But I have this great book that I'm excited to read about like the purpose of events and being able to meet. And so I'm looking forward to that. One update on some events is it's been said, but just so you hear it, Synod Assembly is canceled for this year. And we are still in the process of planning the fall theological event, September 20th to the 22nd. We have a great planning team from the good people of conferences 1 and 2. Registration will open July 15th. And so we hope by then to know whether or not it's a go. So you'll be hearing little snippets, but that will happen at that point, whether we push forward and plan on it or we figure something else out. It will be in Alexandria at Luther Crest with some blocks of rooms at Arrowwood as well. And so I see a couple of people from the planning team on that, and it's gonna be pretty great if we are able to meet together. I want to share with you a couple of resources that we have. Here's our main webpage, and then I've rearranged our COVID-19 resource page just because it was getting to be a lot of information for one page. So we have some separate links to lead you in to some separate areas. There has been some discussion and on our council president's meeting last night on parking lot services. That's here on the main page right here, some faith-based guidance from Minnesota on having parking lot services. So that's right there. Another resource that's been asked for a lot that lots of council presidents have asked for is the White House's and CDC guidelines for opening up America again. And that's again here right on the main page. A couple of other things I want to lift up is under our ELCA and synodical resources is we have all the Zoom calls that have been recorded. So if you missed one and want to go back, I tend to listen to some Zoom calls while I'm doing some other things to multitask that way to glean some information. And then another thing I want to lift up is under our social media resources. I have this Google spreadsheet that's editable for when you guys do worship online. You can click on there, put your information on the bottommost line. You don't have to worry about alphabetizing. And then it will be saved and it will click all to the right function, thanks Google. And I'm going to make a page on our website that will be available for congregations that are in transition or aren't able to do things online, just as another good resource. That spreadsheet, I think I put up like the first or second week of the stay-at-home order, so it's time to take care a little bit of that. And then right at the top, we have our Synod Resilient Communities grant application. We have had quite a few. If your congregation submitted and it was looked at for round 1, I sent emails last night to those congregations, and round 2 will be coming up here in a little while. So thank you so much for all that you guys have been doing. I am also updating our council presidents database. And so if you get an email from me, please email me back with that information. So I think that's it for now.
Thanks, Chris. Pastor Keith Zay, our Director for Evangelical Mission, for whom one of the important areas of ministry in his portfolio is stewardship and mission support. So he has a mission support update for you.
Thank you, Bishop Bill. Good to see all of you. We're looking at our first quarter. We've just completed. We're going to be sending out next week to all our congregational treasurers a report of where it is with the giving from the congregation, so they can check to see that what information we have that we've shared with the treasurer is accurate. and updated in a good way. And having that work before us and that mailing going out next week. And by the way, I do encourage you as roster leaders and synodically authorized ministers to check in with your treasurer and get your own sense too of where things are at and what your thoughts are in your pastoral leadership and ministry role. But here's a snapshot in time, just a couple of factoids. To date, we have received 8.6% less than last year at this time. And although sobering, it's also gratifying. It's mixed because that means that we've got about a $26,000 and $26,006 differential. And we're not surprised by that. It could be even greater. And we're knowing that congregations have varying degrees of this. Some are ahead of where they were last year, others are behind, and there's a variety of variables that go into that. But I want to let you know that as of today, in this first quarter, 108 of our 233 congregations have participated. They've shared a portion financially to support ministry you all share in as a synod and also as the whole church of the LCA. And 115 congregations, or about 52%, have yet to participate. Now, this isn't totally surprising because we know that our history and our storyline is that the last quarter of the fiscal year, November, December, January, that is a main quarter for us. A lot of catching up or a lot of one-time do the whole year and that final quarter happens. But when I took a look at the participating congregations, I noted that 33 of them increased their first quarter giving compared to a year ago. And 33 had to do less for a variety of reasons. I had to double check that, 33 and 33. The differential is that we had an increase in total of those 33 congregations giving and ramping up their giving to $49,539, and the decrease totaled of those 33 congregations was $59,866. So that was a $10,327 differential. So that factor, as well as we have fewer participating thus far this year compared to last year, and given the times we're living in, that's not shocking, and we understand that. That said, I'm going to give you my cell number, if you're ready, 218-790-1764. I'll repeat it again because I invite you to call me as your adjunct staff person in the area of stewardship, congregation vitality, mission support. And we've also got a wonderful stewardship table of leaders from across our synod that have a passion and expertise, and we're ready to come alongside and be available to you. And that can also include some coaching and mentoring and some resourcing. So 218-790-1764. You can call any time, day or night. And Cheryl answers the phone for me because I don't know. I'm teasing. I will answer the call. I got two quick announcements. Give you an update on Give Minnesota at home. As of this moment, we had 71 donations, 63 online, 8 online, because we're starting to receive envelopes from those that received a mailing in this regard. And we're at $8,080. And that will continue to go up. And then to let you know that Chris is going to be a real help here with social media and getting out the latest word that there's been an extension to May 20th for registering so that an application can be made for the Domestic Hunger Grant series for 2021. So there's still time to register. It's easy to do online. There's a link for that. And then after you register, then there's an application process. It's not onus and it's online, and just want you to be aware of it. And if there's other colleagues and siblings in Christ that are not a part of this call, you may just pass that word along, whether through your text study or other opportunities. But we do still have a window here to make a request. That's my report, Bill.
Thank you, Keith. Well, and thanks for all that you do to fulfill your call. It's a part of your letter. Each one of our letters of call is to be mission interpreters, to interpret the mission of the church and to promote our shared mission. So thanks for what you do to do that. One couple of ways, real practical ways to help. I think, so you heard in Keith's report about $10,000 of that 26,000 that were off from last year is congregations experiencing decline, which is not surprising at all. In fact, I would have thought that might be more. I think we're doing quite well as a synod, given our unique economy and the way that it's impacted by impacts in agriculture prior to COVID-19 and tourism and education after COVID-19. But the other 16,000 is those 115 non-participating congregations. And some of that is congregations experiencing decline because of COVID-19, but I think some of it is probably just congregations that handle things via paper, and someone's not going into the offices regularly, and there's a little more stress during COVID-19 for whoever's writing those checks to the synod. So it might merit just a checking in with the treasurer and the council just to see if there's a standard practice that maybe has been inadvertently overlooked during this particular moment. Just a thought. So let's see what do we have next. So I want to visit with you about the guidance that was promised and that you did not receive. So one of the things that happened in the interim was that in fact, it was very shortly after our conversation last week, the 6 bishops of Region 3 met and decided that we would like to prepare shared guidance, and that we were willing to find a way to do that. And then we learned just the next day that the ELCA, our churchwide partners, intended to produce guidance. And so we thought as Region 3 bishops, it would be best for us to wait together for that ELCA guidance to come out. And in the meantime, produce a letter, not unlike the letter I sent out last week, just framing how we're thinking about this and our values. So you can look for that letter from the 6 bishops tomorrow. And I believe, knocking on wood here, I have seen the rough draft of the guidance from the ELCA, and I think it's excellent. It's going, through the final stages of approval. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to share it with you tomorrow or the next day at the latest. And so when that comes out, there'll be a suite of resources that we'll provide around reopening guidance. The first one is a document that I took and from the Texas, North Dakota documents and tweaked for our context and made it more specifically focused around when, the question of when. And as I reiterated to last week and to the presidents again last night, we are not close to the day when we can start to regather in face-to-face worship. And we're quite some distance away from when we can do so in a way that feels remotely like the church gatherings that we're familiar with from the past. Phase 1 and even phase 2 are still going to feel like we have they're not going to feel like the kinds of inspiring worship services we're accustomed to, let's put it that way. And so there'll be that document that's really to try to think through as leaders, when is it safe? And it talks about the phases. And in that, we make reference to President Trump's guidance from the White House website, the CDC guidance, which is the same guidance, and very intentionally letting people know that that's the guidance we're looking to, and that some of the details will get fleshed out when Minnesota guidance appears, but the shape of it will be very similar. So, and then there'll be a suite of other resources from the Minnesota Conference of Churches, from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, I even have one from the United States Air Force that I think is excellent. All of those for your leaders to utilize, because I think the main piece of guidance for reopening is going to be that ELCA piece. That'll be most contextual for us. But I think the other pieces will be informative as you begin to try to answer some of the key questions that are asked. What I like about the Air Force document is it's really just a bunch of questions that are important for leaders to be asking. So that's what you can be looking for. I think I think it'll be some good resources that we place in your hands as leaders. And then once you get there, once we start to roll, I'm hopeful that this will give you as leaders and your leadership something to focus on that's related to reopening, but isn't actually reopening, because it's going to require some planning. And perhaps diffuse some of the energy to open too soon. I think there are news stories coming out of Canada and other places in the US of congregations sharing that their regret for having opened too soon. And invite you, if you're struggling with your own leadership, to feel free to share those. So that's where we're at with guidance. So you can expect that to come out soon. Again, a letter tomorrow from the 6 bishops in Minnesota, and either later tomorrow or later this week, actual guidance around reopening from our churchwide organization and others. So we as a Synod staff are preparing a full worship service for June 7th, which is Holy Trinity Sunday. I had intended to preach on that day, but then Presiding Bishop Eden said that she wanted to preach on that day. And I thought, yeah, we'd probably like to hear from our presiding bishop. So she'll be the preacher for that service. And we as Synod staff will provide a full service that you can use in your context. We hope it's useful to you. Maybe that could be a Sunday off for you. It was going to be the Sunday of our Synod Assembly, but it's not. So the other thing, I will be producing a sermon that will be available the week before Memorial Day. It's a Memorial Day sermon. I feel a sense of call to provide something from I think, somewhat unique experiences I've had as a member of the military, and how I think that is parallel in many ways with the circumstances that people are living through today. So that'll be available that week. I'll also be producing a video just around this whole question of when. It'll be about when. And because we keep hearing from many of you that you're getting a lot of pressure to open sooner than any of you are comfortable. I will just say this, I think in a couple of places where that conversation has moved down the road a little further, it's gotten stalled at the point where those forces that are trying to open are finding out that really quite a few members of their congregation don't want to. And if you poll the general public in the United States, it's about 80% who believe that, we need to take this slowly. And so, you always have the vocal 15%, but it's possible that you have the majority of folks who are thinking more rationally about this. So let's see. So I'll provide a video around that, just on the question of when. And then I also, by middle of next week, will have a video that's just a real short video that's intended to be a message to our young people, especially focused towards high school aged young people, and especially seniors, and the way in which their reality has changed significantly. I just want to address that and give them a message of hope. So, quick questions before we roll into the Osterholm video. The worship service will actually be ready no later than the Wednesday before that June 7th, but it'll probably be sooner than that. One of the things that we do want to do, thank you, is we want to have a conversation with leaders who are in the high risk category. We need to get that scheduled. Maybe we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and just do that right now. I'm going to throw a date out there for later this week. And hopefully it can work for most of us anyway. So I'm guessing some of you may take Fridays off. So what if we did a Thursday gathering at, say, 3 o'clock? 3 o'clock for, and we'll send out a Zoom link to everyone on that. And this is for any rostered ministers or SAMs who are in the high risk category, 65 or older, underlying health conditions. I think it would be helpful for us to have a conversation. Okay, and we'll record that just in case someone needs to miss it. Okay, I'm going to roll into that video unless timing of the high school senior message. It'll come out middle of next week. Any other questions on there that we should address, Chris?
There's questions coming up about outdoor worship and guidance on that.
So,
Not parking lot, but outdoor.
Right. So right now, all of the guidance does not differentiate between indoors and outdoors. But there was a hint from the governor in the faith leaders call with the governor last week, and from Mike Osterholm, that there might be some guidance that's specifically tailored to outdoors, but no promises. Right now, the guidance states that there's no, it does not differentiate between the two, but that could change. Anything else? All right, we're going to roll into this. This is about 15 minutes. I think if you haven't seen it, it's pretty compelling. And I'll just let you know, it can be discouraging if you've been thinking any day now, we're going to be ready to go back.
And you probably read this article in the New York Times. And a story respected around the world, his home is in Minnesota. His start this little downstairs, public house at the University of Minnesota, and his record of Central Texas Institute of Policy. So we could second one with the pandemic. We actually had one in 2009, which was relatively mild. In late March or April, in Mexico, first in North America, and that early spring season. We were going to the water, and anything that was September was a big peak in October, and we were right now showing again, and then eventually became a beautiful blue line. So with the coronavirus, first were in Wuhan, China.
Bill, the sound isn't coming through well from the
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll stop that.
Yeah, can you start it over? I haven't been able to hear since it started.
Yeah, I'm going to start it over. Sorry about that. Hang on a sec. Thanks for letting me know that. I made a little technical error there when I shared it. I needed to allow the computer to share sound. So we'll start it over. It was I could hear everything just fine.
We are honored today to welcome Dr. Michael Osterholm to provide insight for the decisions we must make.
Can you all hear it now? All right, good.
You probably recognize Dr. Osterholm from his appearances on NBC, CNN, Fox News, PBS, Minnesota Almanac, and you probably read his articles in the New York Times. An authority respected around the world, his home is in Minnesota. He's the McKnight Presidential Endowed Chair in Public Health at the University of Minnesota and the director of its Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy.
So we've expected more influenza pandemics. We actually had one in 2009, which was a relatively mild one, a new strain that emerged. It emerged in late March, early April, H1N1 in Mexico, spread through North America, and that early spring peak went away for reasons we have no idea why. And then it came back in early September with the big peak in October, and then went away on its own again, and then eventually became a seasonal flu virus. So when this coronavirus first emerged in Wuhan, China, at the time there was a sense, well, this is not going to cause a pandemic. There are other coronaviruses that occurred called SARS and MERS, where in both of those illnesses, very serious, by the way, but the people were not really that infectious until about the 5th or 6th day of illness. Once we understood that, and we were able to eliminate the animal reservoir in the case of SARS in the Guangdong province markets, we could stop it. And we did. We literally stopped SARS in about 6 months and it disappeared. MERS is a bit of a different situation. That is a virus associated with camels on the Arabian Peninsula, where there's 1.7 million camels on that peninsula who are infected with this. They don't get seriously ill, and they occasionally transmit to humans. And we keep seeing MERS cases occur there, this Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. But again, like SARS, you're not infectious till about the 5th or 6th day. And at that point, you can get people isolated, identify the contacts, follow up, and we can handle it quite well. So when this new SARS-like virus occurred in Wuhan and the cases started growing, our initial reaction was, well, it's supposed to be like SARS or MERS. We'll get this thing under control, somewhat quickly. Well, within a matter of a week to 10 days, some of us who are quite involved in analyzing the data realized this was not SARS or MERS. This was acting very much like a flu virus. And in fact, we hypothesized in even the earliest days that probably a lot of the transmission occurred in people before they were sick, or before if they did get sick in the earliest days of their illness. Some people likely didn't get sick at all. And that was why on January 20th, our center actually put out a document saying this would be a worldwide pandemic. There was no way we were going to contain this in China, that it was going to spread around the world. The first week of February, we laid out a scenario where because of the time from when you get exposed to you get sick is about 5 days, which is about twice the length of influenza, and you transmit on average to at least 2 people. If you think about it, you have 1 person on day 1, you have 2 people on day 5, 4 people on day 10, you get the numbers, and you go 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and we figured it would take literally about a month before the world would recognize that this was spreading through the world. Well, the end of February, early March, we realized what was happening and away it went. Since that time, we have seen outbreaks throughout the world and what's happening. So what's going to happen with this? Where is it going to go? Well, first of all, we know that those highest at risk of having serious illness are those who are older, over age 65 typically, those who have underlying health conditions, heart disease, renal disease, those who have had blood cancers or certain kind of lung cancers, and unfortunately for our country, also those who are obese. And even on the younger age groups, we're seeing right now a major increased occurrence of serious illnesses and intensive care medicine. What you're seeing right now is, in fact, the earliest stages of this pandemic, meaning that what it's going to do is likely unfold for months to come. We estimate that about 5 to 15% of the U.S. population has been infected to date. That number will not slow down in any way, shape, or form, short of us shutting down until it gets to 60 or 70%. That's what we know in what we call herd immunity, when there's enough infected people who recover who have immunity, which at this point we don't know if that's absolutely certain, but we believe it to be, at least in the short term, where they're immune. And then when those people are immune, they're like rods in the virus reaction, they slow it down. But even then, it will continue to transmit. Now, the only other way to get to that 60 or 70% other than natural infection, some people getting severely ill and dying, is a vaccine. And you're going to hear a lot about vaccines coming up. I'll just be really frank and honest with you. We don't know if we can get a vaccine. The reason is I think that this could be very difficult. I surely think that anyone who talks about a January timeline of having a vaccine means that we can actually have one that could possibly be available, but to manufacture millions to billions of doses, to distribute them, etc., is going to take months. And this, of course, we're living on virus time right now, not human time. And so I think what's going to happen over the course of the next months is the virus will continue to do what it does. Now, in terms of what might happen with these cases going forward, I would just say right now, we just put out a document last week that's received a fair amount of attention from our center. We lay out 3 scenarios, basically, to get us from 5 to 15% to that 60 to 70% level. One is it will look like an influenza pandemic, where this set of cases we see will start to level off. People will become very excited about the fact that we've won. It'll be quiet potentially for several months, and then all hell will break loose. And we could have a major peak that could far dwarf anything we've seen. If you tell that to the people in New York, they can't believe that because they've already been through so much, but that's the case. We estimate in New York, we're no higher than 15% positive in that entire metropolitan area, which means they have a long ways to go to get to 60 to 70%. The second possibility is that it could be one where we just see a lot of what I call foothill bumps, where it'll flare up here, it'll flare up there, it'll flare up here, and it will keep trying to tamp it down with our distancing and so forth. But in fact, it will just keep going until it gets to 60, 70%. Or we may just see, I don't think this is the case, a slow burn, where we just keep seeing case after day after day after day, and then eventually it will get to that 60, 70% level. If you ask me which one of those scenarios, I couldn't tell you. I just know, like gravity works for physical items, viral gravity works for this virus. It will keep working to find people. Countries that are reported have had this under control. So with that, Bishop, I'm happy to end it and take questions however you'd like to go with it.
Oh, yes, we have several questions, but first, thank you so much for that very succinct and important reality check about what is happening. Okay, most of us serve in congregations where we have members with lots of opinions. If you could imagine yourself pastoring a congregation, how would you express your opinion regarding gathering together in the building in person for worship once again?
This is a real challenge. And I say that because transmission is through what we call aerosols. If you could have been in this room that I'm in, my office, my home office right now, and I hadn't been in here all day. I have been since 4 this morning, but if I hadn't been, just in the time I was talking to you, if I could use a glow light to show you what this room would look like, it would be full of particles, just from me talking. Mm-hmm. Think about what an aerosol is. Remember the last time you saw the sunlight coming through the windows in your house and you saw that dust floating? You thought, oh, my house is so dusty, I need to clean. Those are aerosols. When you go to the department store, if they're existing after this whole thing, you're 4 aisles away from the perfume section and you smell it. That's an aerosol. So the challenge we have is that, we have grossly overstated in public health the role of hygiene as it relates to hand washing and surfaces. And part of that comes from the fact because people want to glom onto that because they believe it's something you can do. But if you look at the scientific data, it's breathing the air. And so from that standpoint, you have to think about anybody you bring together. And I mentioned this before, we now know that people are most infectious likely in the 2 days before they get sick. So you can't even sit there and screen on that. Fever has been a notably unreliable way to screen. You can say people wear masks. Well, you know, that's not helpful largely for two reasons. One is the kind of mask you have to wear to actually stop transmission would be what we call an N95. A respirator that's tight face fitting around your face. Basically, all the air comes through the matrix. These N95s are actually poured. It's not paper. It's a poured material that hardens and allows air through but catches the virus. In that regard, we can't have the general public using these. We are so short of supply right now. We need to save them for the healthcare workers who are on the front lines with very high levels of virus in those rooms. Still, we're losing healthcare workers every day, literally dying from being on the job. So we're left with surgical masks, which we're running short of too, and then cloth masks. And surgical masks were never meant to protect the individual who wears them. They were meant to basically be a surgeon protecting you as the patient from them dripping down into your wound. But then we found that there were things called droplets, large particles, that when you did cough or you did sneeze would fall usually within 6 feet of you. That's where you often get the 6-foot rule. There surely are virus particles in those droplets, and a surgical mask can help stop that. But the problem is where there's droplets, there's also aerosols. So they're within the 6 feet too. And aerosols will come in right through the cracks on the side of the mask where you're breathing. You don't breathe through the material, you breathe through the sides where they're open. They're not tight face fitting. And so surgical masks are designed better than cloth masks. Cloth masks, and I have served on a National Academy of Science committee on this. We have documents on our website looking at this. Cloth masks have never shown to have any impact on transmission. It's become an emotional issue. I get more hate mail literally because I won't endorse cloth masks as a way to stop transmission. And the reason I don't is because we also have evidence that people who wear cloth masks think they're now protected and they don't do the social or physical distancing they should do. And so it is counterintuitive, but they may actually hurt you by having that because, again, it comes in the air. The original thought was when the CDC recommended them, which actually came from a White House initiative, was that, well, if you're asymptomatic, meaning no symptoms, and you're going to be out and about, at least that'll help keeping you from spreading it to others. And if you're coughing, it will. But remember, you're not supposed to be out if you're coughing. But if you breathe in and out, it'll come right out the sides of the mask. So I would like to be able to give you a prescription to say, just wear a cloth mask, you know, don't shake hands, you know, stay apart. That's not going to work. One of the more notable outbreaks, as some of you may be aware of, there was an outbreak in the Seattle area with this early days where a church choir got together for practice. One of the individuals was asymptomatically infected, and without touching, they did not touch, they kept distance apart while they were practicing. No one shook hands or hugged, and 42 of the 61 people were infected in that event. That gives you a sense of what we're talking about and why that's a big challenge. So I would say your gatherings, I don't know when to tell you that you can get together.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a very, and so as the pastor, if you had to answer that in 30 seconds, you would say, we're not going to get together for the foreseeable future.
You know, if we see virus levels drop to almost no transmission in the next few months, then I'd say you may have a temporary respite where the chances are very low. But if that happens, that's the worst sign. That's the very same as being in the eye of a hurricane, is the back wall that nails you hardest. Because if we have very few cases this summer, I can almost guarantee you we're going to have one hell of a wave this fall, because that will be fitting the influenza model completely. And that's what we worry about. I'd rather see cases continue on because we're going to get to 60 or 70% no matter what. I mean, there's no beam me up Scotty machine here that's going to avoid gravity. Okay.
So just to be clear, if there is a respite and people can worship together, do we allow singing? Do we allow Holy Communion?
You know, I don't think communion is the problem. And as I've said, environmentally, I don't think it is. It's a problem for a whole lot of other reasons, okay? There are a lot of other viruses that we transmit with the common cup. Um, but I don't think this is one that we have to worry about. I worry more about if you're handing out communion again, if you really have people who are infected, you're all close together. But as I've already shared with you, if you have 25 people, even in a moderate sized church, you got a lot of aerosol in there. Okay, so I mean, it's at some point you just have to decide that this is low enough level for us to accept and to move on. And I wish I had a way magically to tell you what that is. I don't. Choir singing, clearly choirs are very good ways to project, aerosols and virus. But again, if the risk is very, very low, we're hardly seeing any cases, then I think that's a legitimate question to have. And, you have to let people make that decision. I think on their own with you. I mean, really part of it, leadership of the church, but at the same time, I mean, if they want to come, they can. Nobody's forcing them to.
So our past
So that's, again, that whole video is 42 minutes. One of the points that Dr. Osterholm makes in another part of the video that we cut out is the critical role of leadership in a pandemic. I mean, we have a situation where there isn't a vaccine, there isn't a cure, there isn't much that's known for effective treatments. So it's not science that right now is the path to keeping people safe and carrying people through this. It's leadership, the critical role that leadership plays right now. And we as leaders and as followers of Jesus Christ, I think it's incumbent upon us to lead the way in our communities, to model the behavior that because if you think about this pandemic, it's really only behavior right now that we have to control it. And so that becomes a function of leadership then. And so it's essential that we both model it and advocate for it. So, were you able to hear it? Looks like the volume was really low. I didn't see all that. Sorry. That shortened version is available on the website, and the longer version is also available on the website. So hopefully you got something out of that. Questions?
What was the speaker's name?
Dr. Mike Osterholm. He's the former state epidemiologist. He holds an endowed chair at the University of Minnesota, and he's the head of I can't remember the title, but it's an important international study center for infectious diseases. He's like the rock star in the field of public health.
He was on Meet the Press on Sunday morning as well.
Yeah. I'm just going to exit out of this video. So questions, any questions about the video or about ways that it might be used? Chris, can you cut and paste the link into the chat section there? Either the Dropbox link or the... So one of the issues that's come up recently that's been a lot of chatter on the Bishop's Listserv, and our ELCA General Counsel has weighed in, not with a strong opinion, but with a sense that normally around matters of liability related to the church's ministry, your directors and you are pretty well covered as long as you have good liability insurance. But the question has emerged, what about liability related to COVID-19? Let's say we bring people back, people get sick, somebody dies, or maybe several people die, not just in our church, but in the community. is their liability. And the ELCA General Counsel has said that there could very well be, because one of the stipulations in many of our church policies is that you're covered for liability unless you knowingly create an unsafe workplace or environment. And so while people can argue till they're blue in the face whether or not a place is safe, the only evidence to go to that would, how would a reasonable person describe a safe workplace would be I think under COVID-19, are you following the CDC's guidelines? And so I think if we were to charge into reopening and not follow the guidelines, a case could be made that you created an unsafe environment. So one of the important considerations that will be in all the guidance, it'll be one of the first or second bullets in the reopening guidance, is to check with your insurance carrier to see what your insurance carrier says about this. And some carriers are already developing COVID-specific guidance. And you'll want to look at that, lay that right alongside the guidance that we provide, and for sure follow any guidance that your insurance carrier might provide. And again, phase one is, look, in Minnesota, we are still seeing an increase in cases. And part of that is due to the great job we're doing in Minnesota around testing. We've got we've got Mayo and 3M here. And so we have kind of a leg up on other states in terms of the numbers of tests. So we're testing more, so we're finding more cases, which is a good thing. But eventually we will get to declining cases. And we have to have 14 consecutive days of declining cases before we get to phase one. And we are, right now estimates are mid-June before we get to declining cases. So, or maybe late June. So we're not looking at phase one until mid-July, possibly. And phase one, what is that? That's people in masks with standing 6 feet apart, 9 people, right? Phase one is very similar to our current phase that we're in. So phase, 14 days after that, as long as cases continue to decline, we roll into phase two, which starts to look a little better. We're still physical distancing. We're still practicing hygiene. We're probably not singing. And we're standing 6 feet apart, but at least there's a few more of us in the room. It's really not until we get to phase three, which is 42 days of consecutive declining cases, where we start to see gatherings that feel meaningful. And so you have all been working incredibly hard at creating meaningful gatherings here in places like this, and virtual gatherings, and you're being very effective in that. And my sense is that people who try to come back earlier are going to discover that they're not nearly as satisfying or as helpful as the ways that we are finding that we are able to share the gospel even now. Okay, questions, thoughts? "77 pastors and deacons, and there's got to be at least 177 thoughts and questions out there." Yeah, the Catholic diocese, the Catholic bishops in Minnesota are going to roll in starting with phase one. They shouldn't be starting yet, but I don't think anyone's going to try to stop them. But they have produced guidance, which is very detailed and specific, as you can imagine, around the Mass. And for each phase, we're going to link that guidance, because I think that some of the practices around the Mass you might find helpful, just in terms of how to do it safely. They've given a lot of thought to it. It's well researched. The thing about daily Mass, I just know from my own experience with in ecumenical settings, the people who tend to attend daily Mass are older than 65. It's not always the case, but I'm wondering in most communities how you're getting 9 people to attend Mass and none of them are in the high risk group.
Have the congregation presidents received this information about that you just gave us and that the Dr. Osterholm gave us?
Yes. Yeah, they've had the exact same. This is based, normally our two meetings are somewhat parallel. Sometimes they're very different, but this week they're exactly the same. So they've received the exact same information. So here's what I'm thinking. So I'm thinking we are in the spirit of Jeremiah and God's people who were told to build houses. I think what building a house looks like in our context is beginning to move from some of the reactive mode that we've been in necessarily to talking about spending more time on some best practices around online worship, around pastoral care, around administration in the environment that we're in. I think that's what building houses looks like. We'll continue to address the issues that feel urgent, like reopening, and try to find ways that we can help you navigate that. But I also think we need to move in this space and time to being engaged with each other. And now you're the experts. I'm learning as I sheepishly talk to some of you that you're way more adept at this creating video and editing and figuring out ways to splice it together than I am. So we're not certainly going to hold ourselves up as experts, but together there's a lot of wisdom. And so I think it will be useful for us to spend some time together around best practices for ministry in the mostly virtual environment that we're in. That's my sense. I'd like to get what your thoughts are about that. Or we could just watch movies. What do you think? What's going to be helpful for you in this, to spend this time together?
I have 2 funerals in cemeteries back to back at different cemeteries on Saturday. And when there's no funeral and there's only just the interment, I am trying to promise families a time when we can have some times for sharing when this is done. But I'm glad for this reality today that it will be a little while from now, and that I need to be telling my families that. So I've had six people pass away, 1 from COVID, since this has all began. And the funeral situation is rather difficult, I have to say.
Yeah, I think, we've been talking about this, about the reality of grief that we're living in now. And I think also a lot of the deferred grief or the deferred grieving that's happening. We know that the fall or maybe the winter is going to be a time where I think before we can rush back into a big celebratory worship, I started imagining today that when the time comes and we can all gather and we can be together in a celebratory way, I think that service is going to have to move very intentionally from lament to praise. We'll have to begin with lament. But what I hear you saying, Kathy, is that it would be useful to have some conversation around pastoral work with people that are grieving and even our own grief, dealing with our own grief, right? Because plenty is being lost. I did see a note that I was really excited to see that Hamilton is going to be on the Disney Channel on July 31st. So I'll definitely be watching that.
There was some questions on Vacation Bible School. I've put out when I've seen webinars on how to do Vacation Bible School, or whether or not I've put a couple of those online. I know both Luther Crest and Pathways are not doing their day camps this year. And so I will look for some resources for Vacation Bible School. I know some churches are going to be doing some components online, and others are taking the year off from the first third of Life people I've been talking to. But I'll get some resources on VBS.
I have a message from Luther Crest, though they're not doing their traditional day camp. They are putting together a bunch of digital resources that will be available the first couple weeks of August is what they're shooting for. That can be used either in-home or as congregational leaders, we could add Zooms and stuff to them to do them together.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm a board member there, and they are going to be providing about 6 weeks of activities with about 40 summer staff people, doing a lot of Zoom and then a lot of self-directed activities at home with families or congregation.
That's great. I'll make sure I loop in with them so I can share that information.
So just the initial input I'm seeing here is that initially we, in terms of conversations around best practices, would be helpful, especially focused around pastoral care issues. And we can get to other things too, but maybe that's where we'll start next time. We'll have some time to focus. And there's an excellent ELCA resource from the ELCA Coaching Network, which I don't know, Chris, if you can find that, put you on the spot here, but there's a great webinar that's available there now. It was recorded on grieving, on grief coaching, and I think you'll find that really useful. Pastor Rob Nelson, who's our coaching coordinator. Rob, do you happen to be on the call? Okay. We're going to honor Rob. He's not here, so we're going to speak only well of him. But he's our coordinator, and I know that he attended that webinar, and has really speaks highly of it. So that's a good resource. But we do have links to the ELCA coaching webinars, which I think you'll find really helpful. So let's
Bishop Bill,
Go ahead.
This is Randy McGuire here. I think you're aware of what's going on in the Bagley community among the pastors there, several different denominations, and we are having discussions about when to start church among all the denominations. I'm curious if there is any discussion at your level or on the denominational or synodical level of other church leaders how to do this, or if every denomination is pretty much up to doing its own thing.
So the ELCA resource that will be coming out, I'm hoping tomorrow, thinking by the latest the end of this week, that, running it by risk management is what's happening right now. So that always gives me a little pause. But hopefully it'll be, before the end of the week that you'll see that resource. Anyway, that resource was compiled together with our ecumenical partners. And so at least with those who are willing to play with us, that it has the wisdom of all of those traditions, faith traditions. So I'm grateful for that. And the other guidance that you see coming out of the other denominations, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, Episcopalians, is going to be very similar to that, to ours, because it was a group effort. So they're in the Bagley area, and by the way, they're using their ministerial as a way to have this conversation, which I think is a great idea. And I know they're also pulling together a SMART team, and they're having some folks on Think with them who just know things about public health and medicine, and I think that's wise. I would recommend that if you have an active ministerial, to see if there's ways you can pull them together. The question was asked, whether the Minnesota Council of Churches will produce guidance. I'm not optimistic about that. I guess we'll see. I know they're actually talking about it as we speak. I think that you're going to have a lot of good guidance to use from the ELCA and from the other sources that we provide. I don't think you'll have an absence of it. Okay, I thought let's do a quick around the horn with our staff that is on the call. I know that Keith, anything, I just moving in a circular fashion around all of my screens here. Keith, do you want to add anything to what you've already shared? No? Okay. Pastor Karen Young Training?
I don't have anything either.
Okay. I think I saw Brad Scogan out there in cyberspace somewhere. Are you there, Brad? Maybe he got off. Janelle or Kathy? Or John?
I'll just share some good news.
Yay.
We are sending out gifts from our Synod Fund for Leaders to some of our candidates. Well, actually all of our candidates except for those who are on internships. If they're on full-time internships, they're not eligible for our Synod Fund for Leader scholarships, but we are sending, let's see, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 scholarships ranging from $500 to $2,325. And it's been fun informing candidates about those gifts, and they're grateful for the support from the Synod. So that's the good news of this week. It's been well-received news from our candidates, grateful for the support from the Synod. And as I look at all the faces here on the screen, I want to say a word of thanks to all of you who maybe have contributed or encouraged your congregations to contribute to the Synodical Fund for Leader Fund. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Pastor John. And thanks to all of you for your good and faithful work. I'm grateful for our partnership together in the gospel. And I just love seeing you in this way, and look forward to the day when, what do they say in our Jewish brothers and sisters, next year in Jerusalem. So wherever Jerusalem is for us, we'll find out. But God's peace be with all of you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.